they took like $80 billion to hire new IRS agents to target the middle-class Americans.
Oh, so you're saying that Donald Trump's tax policy in which he hired IRS agents to enforce targeted middle class.
No. This was after the IRA had passed.
Wait, I mean, you're saying that the IRS agents were targeting middle class Americans, which meant the tax code they were enforcing upon Americans targeted middle class Americans. Right?
No. What I'm saying is
no. So then they weren't targeting middle class Americans because they were just simply executing and enforcing the current tax code.
I mean, I can agree there. Yeah.
Okay, whose tax code were they enforcing?
Well, I mean, it didn't. The tax code. Yeah, I guess you could say that it was Trump's tax code, but
it's not like I guess you could say. It's just that it literally was. Mr. the Bear, why do you support Trump?
I support Trump because he is a better president for America than Kamala Harris could ever be. Kamala Harris was not qualified to run the country in any way, shape, or form.
And why was Donald Trump less qualified than she was?
Well, no, Trump isn't less qualified because
for sure.
I would trust the person who has had multiple successful businesses and has also ran the country before and gotten the popular vote by the country versus someone who didn't even win the primary.
Get a grip. Bro.
So in my head, we kind of wanted Trump more than Kamala.
Okay, to respond to your first point about saying that you're going to trust him because he's a businessman, get a fucking grip. This man has had 4.5 years to apply his business experience into his economic policy, and every single time he has failed this country. Think about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in his first term. Cost $2 trillion, increased income inequities in this country, and only led to an additional $6 billion per year to the federal government. Terrible investment. That's a fact. What about the second term? Blanket tariffs? What did that lead to? Oh, fucking recession? JP Morgan today is saying that a recession will happen this year. Atlanta Fed went from projecting 4% GDP growth in this financial quarter to a negative 4% recess. Oh, and it only evaporated like $10 trillion in a single 24-hour span off American stock markets. And then Donald Trump went on Truth Social and said it was intentional. Like, I really don't think that this man is applying any of this awesome business experience into his economic policy, because every single time he passes any economic policy, it really hurts this country.
I would disagree with you on that because in his first term, we saw the economy boom. We saw like blue collar jobs go up. We saw more production back in the U.S. And I will say that under Biden's administration, we also almost went into a recession. And I know that some people say, oh, that was because of what Trump did as he was leaving out of office. But I don't think so, because inflation hit like an all-time high when Biden was president. And now Trump is trying his best to undo the damage.
Hey, I have 3 questions.
4 years of the Biden administration.
Hey, I just have 3 questions. This is going to be funny. Right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What did Donald Trump literally do to increase jobs in America? And what did Biden and Harris literally do to almost send America into a recession? And what did Biden and Harris literally do to increase inflation in America?
Okay, so the thing that, and I'll answer your last question first because it's a lot of things that I've learned, is that the Inflation Reduction Act actually raised inflation a lot. And I can't remember the specifics. I don't have it in front of me right now.
That's just a fake talking point. Did you know that? That
is not a fake talking point. It is quite literally proven. Their goal was to reduce inflation, but yet inflation skyrocketed.
Can I tell you why that's just a completely propagandistic talking point?
Because can you repeat that? Sorry.
Can I tell you why in like a single sentence why that is just a completely propagandistic talking point?
Okay.
Because the Congressional Budget Office indicates that Inflation Reduction Act reduces our federal deficit in the next 10 years. How can a bill that reduces our expenditure, reduces our deficit, reduces the amount of money going into the economy, cause the highest levels of inflation in American history?
Okay. So if you're going to say, oh, the budget said it's not going to cause inflation, if you simply look at the inflation rate from before the Inflation Reduction Act was passed versus afterwards, there was a very sharp spike in the inflation rate. And you could see that because gas went up to almost $6 a gallon in some places.
Tell me exactly when the bill was passed.
People couldn't afford groceries. Inflation was just crushing.
Hey, sir, tell me exactly when the bill was passed.
I don't have dates and stuff memorized like you do. I don't do this for a living.
So you are literally being like an RNC shill. You just told us that if you look at the levels of inflation before and after the bill was passed, you'll see an immediate obvious trend followed that bill being passed, but you don't know when the bill was passed. So how could you know the trend followed it?
It's called, I don't have dates and stuff pulled up in front of me. I don't memorize this stuff. I don't do this for a living like you do. I'm just telling you, as someone who is in the middle class, who has like struggled with like the amount of inflation
think about it. Listen, this isn't about you not doing this as your job. I completely understand that I'm significantly more research. Me and Johnny are significantly more research than the average American on politics because it is our job, right? No harm, no foul. I get it 110%. But listen, man, your claim was literally immediately after the bill was passed, all of these indicators like skyrocketed, like hella inflation, gas was more expensive. Okay, well, you could only make that claim if you know when the bill was passed. Like imagine this. Like imagine that like your girlfriend left you, and you got into a fight with your girlfriend, and you argued that my girlfriend left me right after I got into a fight with her, and then I was like, when did your girlfriend leave you, and when did you get into a fight? And you were like, I have no fucking clue. Like you're obviously going to need to possess like this prerequisite information in order to make the claim.
I mean, like, okay, I remember that the act was passed.
I'm going to give you some information here. So you're looking at the 9% inflation rate back in 2022 during the midst of the Omicron and Delta variant. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, there was global inflation at that point, so you can't actually make that correlation to President Biden or an action he has taken. Furthermore, to double down on it, let's understand that the Inflation Reduction Act passed 2 months after that 9% inflation rate took place, and it wasn't in effect until January of the following fiscal year. So it like, I didn't want to jump in to cut you off, but like it's not making sense. You got to correspond this to not the Inflation Reduction Act, but the global pandemic, which was still underway.
Right. And just to kind of like reiterate what Johnny's saying in a way that you'll definitely understand, this is like me saying that Donald Trump's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act caused the highest level of unemployment that we've ever seen since the Great Depression, because in April of 2020, our unemployment rate was 14.8%.
I can see where you're coming from with that, but at the same time, it's just what Trump is doing now is to undo everything.
You're pivoting.
That Biden,
the bear, you're pivoting. I will happily debunk that claim, but let's go 1 point at a time. So you said that the Inflation Reduction Act caused inflation. Then I'm like, when was the bill passed? You're like, I have no clue. And then Johnny's like, the bill was passed 2 months after the 9% peak level of inflation, which was caused by the pandemic and global, by the way. And then I was like, to further demonstrate this point to you, this is like me saying that Donald Trump's tax cuts from 2017 caused the highest level of unemployment in this country since the Great Depression in April of 2020 at 14.8%. I want you to specifically respond to that.
You want me to respond to the fact that, you're saying,
I want you to respond to the 3 different arguments that me and Johnny just gave you to debunk your original claim.
Okay, you're saying that inflation. Okay, I'm really confused as to what your claim is right now. Because
I'll make it super simple. The bill was passed 2 months after the peak of inflation, and to take it one step further, if your argument is just basically associating legislation they passed with things that happen in the American economy, that's like me saying that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017 caused the highest level of unemployment since the Great Depression in April of 2020 at 14.8%.
I disagree with that. Like I'm not like I don't have all these facts and stuff. I can just say, like, from my personal experience, that the unemployment rate was higher under the Biden-Harris administration than it was.
That's just not true. But like
that is true, because under Trump's first term,
it's just not. But it's not relevant to the argument. Like it's called. I'm making what's called a conceptual analogy. What you're saying is not true, but it's not relevant. The point that is relevant that I want you to respond to is you can't just say that this random thing that happened in the economy before this bill was passed was caused by the bill that was passed after it happened.
Okay, you brought up unemployment, and that's what I'm trying to do.
I want you to respond to what I just said, the bear. Stop being dense. Respond to these following words. This random thing that happened in the American economy was not caused by a bill that was passed 2 months after it happened.
I'm going to ask you a question then.
No.
All right. You're terrible to debate with, because I'm trying to give separate points.
Wait. You're going by feelings and you're talking about personal perspective, and that is valid in some extent. But when statistics and data analysis comes into play and you're outright rejecting those facts, then you're not the one who's debating properly here. Furthermore, Dean has asked you multiple times just to respond to the question. You made the claim that the Inflation Reduction Act led to this higher inflation and economic collapse, but we're making the case that this is in direct correlation to the pandemic, and your claim that it's because of the Inflation Reduction Act doesn't timeline makes sense when that passed 2 months after the 9% peak of inflation.
Right.
Okay, I see what you're saying now. So my claim was not that the Inflation Reduction Act was the main cause of it. I'm saying it didn't help matters. That was my claim.
No, just objectively speaking, that wasn't your claim.
Right.
I just want to make it clear. The question I asked you was, how did Biden and Harris cause record high inflation? And your response was the Inflation Reduction Act. So that, just objectively speaking, was not your claim. Stop lying.
Hang on.
I do just want to preface this very kindly, the Bear. I feel like you believe you got to be a contrarian because you're on a debate setting right now. It's okay to concede on something. Like, if you made a claim here and you want to take that back, there is more pride and integrity in saying so than trying to double down and invest in that false claim. Like, it's totally fine and nobody's going to judge you. You don't got to be a contrarian just because you want to be the opposition here. You can easily say, that was a wrong claim, you take it back. That's fine.
I'll actually take it one step further by saying I disagree with Johnny. I actually do think that people will judge you, but it will be positive judgment.
Okay, but I had to look up what I was trying to say because I couldn't say it right. So the Committee on Oversight said that instead of lowering the prices, the IRA hiked taxes on businesses, mandates price controls on drugs, and devoted $80 billion to hire 87,000 new IRS agents to target middle-class Americans.
Okay, so you're saying that the CBO said it hiked tax on businesses. So there was some taxes associated with carbon emissions that were later implemented beginning in the middle half of 2024 after inflation had subsided. What was your second claim?
So my second claim was that they took $80 billion to hire new IRS agents to target the middle-class Americans.
Oh, so you're saying that Donald Trump's tax policy in which he hired IRS agents to enforce targeted middle class.
No. This was after the IRA had passed.
Wait, you're saying that the IRS agents were targeting middle class Americans, which meant the tax code they were enforcing upon Americans targeted middle class Americans. Right?
No. What I'm saying is
so then they weren't targeting middle class Americans because they were just simply executing and enforcing the current tax code.
No, it literally says that the IRA was one of its goals.
Galaxy, I appreciate that.
It hiked taxes on businesses, and it devoted $80 billion and an additional $300 billion to advance Democrats' climate agenda. It had nothing to do with we're going to reduce inflation, because doing all of that, in fact,
so now you
inflation.
also are making a claim about climate agenda. So it was the biggest multi-million-dollar investment into renewable energy resources ever, while also being a massive investment into fracking and also deficit reducing in the next 10 years. Listen, I don't think that the main motivation of the bill was to reduce inflation. We could actually agree there. But once again, this is a complete straw man away from the fact, Brandon, thank you for the galaxy, that I asked you, how do they cause inflation? And you responded with this bill. I agree that this bill didn't significantly reduce inflation. 110%. Okay, I think that its main purposes were outside of that. Okay, 110%. But it did have some disinflationary pressures over the course of the next 10 years, and it definitely did not cause any inflation. But I want to go back to your claim saying that it hired new agents to target middle class Americans. Okay, well, the only way that those agents would be able to target middle class Americans is if the tax code they were enforcing targeted middle class Americans. Could you agree there?
I mean, I can agree there, yeah.
Okay, whose tax code were they enforcing?
Well, I mean, it didn't. The tax code. I guess you could say that it was Trump's tax code, but
it's not like I guess you could say. It's just that it literally was.
No. But the IRA, it specifically wanted the IRS to go after middle class Americans.
Okay,
it wasn't follow the tax code, because Trump's tax code.
So, by the way, that's just simply not true. Stop lying.
I'm not lying, actually. If you look at the
you
stats,
totally are.
But whatever.
No, the stats.
So when Trump was in office,
the bear. I'm just going to clear this up. I'm just going to clear this up. The bear. Please stop lying. Please stop lying. Okay, you're reading off of a right-leaning publication that says that this bill hired 80,000 new IRS agents, which targeted middle-class Americans. The second part of that sentence is an opinion. Right? And it's opinion based upon what IRS agents enforce, which is Donald Trump's tax cuts, and which disproportionately favors the ultra wealthy. No, there were not these 80,000 new IRS agents that were specifically hired with the very specific and explicit purpose of targeting middle-class Americans. That is not true. You would never be able to point me towards any specific language inside of the Inflation Reduction Act in which says they must target Americans below this certain income threshold. That is just a lie. Please stop lying and spewing fake Republican talking points, like in
Okay,
the
then
space
let
in
me
which
let
it's
me let me
supposed to
say
be
it this way
conducive
then.
towards
So
productive,
the way
good
that the
faith
IRA was like
conversation.
set up, it was designed to hurt the middle class because it raised prices on small businesses, and the IRS had more reason to go after the middle class. It didn't.
No, that's also not true. Wait. That's also not true. Wait. That's also not true. Do small businesses track their carbon emissions?
I don't think so.
No, they don't. So, yeah, the only increases on corporations inside of the IRA was specifically on higher carbon emissions, and which went into effect in mid-2024. It didn't affect or even touch small businesses in this country. Okay, I want to make that clear. If you want to talk about tax policy in which targeted small businesses, what we should be talking about is Donald Trump's tax cuts, in which replaced a progressive corporate tax rate with a standardized flat corporate tax rate, meaning that small businesses in America, grossing under 50K in revenue per year, went from paying a 15% corporate tax rate to a flat 25% corporate tax rate across the, 21% corporate tax rate across the board.
Okay, so do you think that because the deficit from about $1 trillion to $2 trillion, and that was in like after the year that the IRA had passed, the deficit had doubled? Can you explain that, please?
Government spent money, and actually, once again, according to the CBO, the IRA reduces the deficit in the next 10 years. Do you care about government expenditure? And if you do, why do you support Trump when he spent twice as much as the Biden-Harris administration? CRB.
Okay, I'm just saying because what you're saying is
I don't want you to interrupt me.
Okay, then continue talking.
The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, indicates that the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, reduces the deficit over the course of the next 10 years. So we know that whatever was added to the deficit in 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, and so on, is not because of the IRA. It's deficit reducing, okay? And that's a fact from the CBO. But if you care about things that increase the deficit, you should never have voted for Trump, because in his first administration, he spent $8.6 trillion. Guess how much Biden and Harris spent?
How much?
4.6.
Okay. Like I said, I'm not really with the whole tax thing. I just know from doing my own research, and you can say that I am like biased towards right-wing news media. Cool. I'm just telling you what I've read about certain things about the IRA and how it has raised inflation and that the deficit has doubled since then.
Bro, you actually haven't even given an argument that it raised inflation. I want you to do that. How did the Inflation Reduction Act cause inflation?
I'm trying to find the sources that I'm using. Hang on. All right, I gotta go.
Did he just call you princess?
Dean, his username was the bear. I could have told you he was getting called princess. Come on, man.
Wait, did I? I just want to make sure. Did we like both hear that?
Yeah. Yeah. He's got things to do. It's date night, man.